Hey, folks, and welcome to Typology, the show in which we explore the mystery of the human personality and the great human adventure, all through the lens of the Enneagram. My name is Anthony Skinner, your producer and co-host. Normally, I tell you what we're going to do, and then I pitch it to the man of the hour. But I'm bringing him in right now. Ian Morgan Cron, what do you got to say for yourself?
Well, as always, super stoked to be here, and always glad to be with you.
Man, I'm pumped about what we're doing today. I love when we have our guests, and we have so many, great guests that range from, scientists to astronauts to authors to therapists. Why don't you tell the folks who may have missed that really interesting show we just had? What was that one about?
Oh, we just did a show with Dr. Will Vanderveer and Keith Kurlander. Will is a psychiatrist, Keith is a psychotherapist, and they have a brand new book that drops in March. It's called Psychedelic Therapy, a revolutionary approach to restoring your mental health and reclaiming your life. And, this has been, because as a therapist, I'm kind of a science nerd about this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And also, I'm not a guy who, when it comes to the science of helping people, I'm not relaxed. Like, I'm very particular. I'm a big believer in evidence-based, really well-researched stuff. And this book is going to be a major contribution to the conversation that's growing rapidly around using psilocybin, MDMA, and other, psychoactive drugs, psychedelics, for treating PTSD, depression, anxiety, being used in relieving anxiety and end of life for different people, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's a brand new frontier in the world of therapy that really demands our attention. And as I said on that show, I am not trying to persuade or dissuade anybody. I'm not trying to promote or not promote. I'm just exploring this because I'm telling you, in the next, first of all, it's already exploding, right? What we're going to see as the FDA starts to approve some of these substances and, for use in therapeutic settings, this is going to become a big question. It's going to become a big question for people of faith as they kind of think through the benefits and potential downsides of psychedelic therapy. And I want to be at the forefront of that conversation too.
Yeah. There was a point where Jung was controversial, right?
Oh, yeah. There's a time when they're all controversial.
So you just went somewhere interesting, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, we had another guest on the show, and that was Chip Conley. And this goes back probably a year now anyway. And I like Chip. I'd read his books, and he writes a lot about midlife transitions. And, he's got a fascinating story at his work at Joie de Vivre Hotels and then at Airbnb. Mm-hmm. And then now he has started a very interesting retreat spa-like setting in both outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico. One is in Baja California. Beautiful, beautiful facilities, top-notch facilitators. So I went on a retreat with a friend on cultivating purpose. And to be honest, here's the deal. I'm 65. I'm not presuming that everybody that's 65 has the benefit of what I'm going to say. Mm-hmm. But I do know what my purpose is, honestly, right? And I even can put it into a sentence, and I've shared it with you before. I feel like my purpose is to help people enter into a deeper conversation with the beautiful mystery of their own lives and God. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, that's just what I do.
Love it.
And I do it through the Enneagram. I do it through my coaching work. I do it through I do it in songwriting. Yeah. I do it as a priest. I do it. I'm like that's the theme that runs through the whole of all the different hats that I wear. Right?
That's cool.
And so I feel like I kind of know why God made me. I really feel like that's pretty good. So I went on this retreat I hope I get something out of it, and I'm going to go with a really open heart that maybe God wants to tweak it or maybe open up new things. Sure enough, he did. And I just loved being with people that are curious, interested, engaged, wanting to know who they are, why they're here. They want to understand and become the best version of themselves. And I could spend 4 days with them, and it was all day There were a lot of really cool activities as well, but to really dig deep, man.
Yeah.
As a therapist and as a priest, come on, bring it.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And that brings me to my point. So over the years, as we've been hosting Typology, there's something kind of wild that's happened. We have more and more therapists, clinicians, supervisors, educators, and they've been listening and reaching out with some really thoughtful questions. For instance, how does this fit, talking about the Enneagram, how does this fit with trauma-informed care?
Right.
What do I do when a client brings their assessment into the therapy room? And we started paying attention to these questions, which we love when you all hit us with questions and send responses to how an episode has impacted you. But we realize this is a conversation that's worth slowing down for and having out loud between the two of us.
Yes. As a friend of mine likes to say, we're going to double click on this conversation, open it up and see what's in there. I honestly love the emails that we get from therapists, right? I get emails, I get texts, whatever, because therapists are genuinely curious people and they're discerning, which I really respect, obviously.
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily looking for shortcuts. When I hear a therapist that I feel is like looking for a hack, I'm not real interested in talking, but they are trying to figure out, how does the Enneagram serve our work, right?
Yeah.
That the work that they're already doing and not in any way supplanting it or replacing it, but just how do I use it, right? And how do I use it wisely,
yes,
right? Because here's the deal. I hear this from therapists all the time. My clients now come in and say to me, I'm an Enneagram 3. Like they announce their type when they show up. As if to say, so we got that out of the way.
Right,
so it's now such a part of the therapeutic world. The conversation is so normalized. And therapists are expected to kind of know the Enneagram. And a lot of people leave therapy if their therapist doesn't. They're like, okay, this therapist isn't for me. They want to be with somebody who understands the Enneagram and all that stuff. But the question always comes down to, well, like, how do we use this responsibly?
Totally. So we want to respond to that community of ours that's listening and that's paying attention and that's asking these questions. And we want to talk today about how the Enneagram can function, not just as a diagnostic tool or personality label, but more as we see it, like a reflective framework, right? Not just like you can use the Enneagram as a flashlight or a weapon, and we want to use it as a flashlight, right? So something that helps clients name old coping patterns, loosen shame, understanding the strategies that they built to stay safe in the world. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So it seems to me that the Enneagram is a personality typology or framework that doesn't actually reveal to people who they are. I think that's a big kind of misunderstanding, right? The Enneagram reveals that your personality is largely, in addition to genetics and temperament and disposition, those sorts of things, is largely a collection of defensive stratagems that you adopt as a little person to navigate relationships, to feel safe, to feel soothed, to feel secure, right? But it's not who you are, right? Like it's just, the Enneagram just reveals predictable habitual patterns of behaving, thinking, and feeling. But it doesn't, what it reveals is that your essence, your core identity is wrapped in these defensive stratagems, and that we become so overly identified with our personalities that we lose touch with who we actually are. And if you're a person of faith, what we would say is a beloved son or daughter of God, which is, by the way, we say that blithely, but let's face it, that's an incredible mystery. And we spend a lifetime trying to unwrap essence from these unnecessary distractions so that we can be more in touch with the authentic Christ self at our core. And our personalities often obscure that because it's just like we're so distracted by our type's challenges in many ways.
I love when someone comes in and saying that thing, well, I'm a 3 and I do X, Y, Z, and you say, well, that's a stereotype, not a type.
Yes.
Right? I love when that's just a great sort of way of differentiating. And I know that we want to help people become better, healthier, happier human beings, and that is more than type, right?
Yes.
So let's get to what the Enneagram is and what it isn't.
Yep.
So when a clinician asks you, okay, what is the Enneagram and what is the Enneagram in a therapeutic context, and what is it not? Like, how do you answer that?
Well, I just sort of described a little bit of how I understand the Enneagram, but what we don't want it to do is flatten complexity, right? We don't want to allow people to become over-identified with these thoughts, behaviors, and patterns as if, oh, that's just who I am. We don't want it to be a way of bypassing things either. We don't want it to bypass trauma work or, parts work, like from internal family systems or whatever their modality is.
Yeah.
Right. And I want to honor that concern right out of the gate that I think therapists have, right? I guess what I would say is the Enneagram is not a diagnosis, right? It's not a we've said this before, a box that we put people in. It's not a personality label, and it's definitely not a replacement for clinical training or evidence-based modalities, right? And if it ever starts functioning that way, it's being misused. What the Enneagram is, when it's used well, is this map of those adaptive strategies. And it helps us understand how someone learned to manage anxiety, pursue safety, to feel safe, to experience a sense of mastery over the world, right, and their environment, and to maintain connection.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite things about the Enneagram and how it's a differentiator from other systems is it defines or describes motivation.
Yes.
And protection, not pathology, not just behavior.
Yes. Yeah, and unfortunately, we live in an age when pathologizing people is very, very common. So let me just give you, and we had a guest on, we had a conversation about this. This concerns me. You know that because for me, it makes me crazy to watch too much social media. But when I do, and I see sometimes they're trained therapists, sometimes they're just wannabe therapists, that have had no clinical training. Talking about, oh, they're a narcissist, or so-and-so is a borderline, or so-and-so is a this. And I'm like, do you have any idea of what you're talking about? Like, because it's like the way they describe it and what to do, how to respond to a narcissist, how to respond to someone with, walking on eggshells with borderlines. And I'm like, you know what? You're kind of just a dangerous, like, blathering idiot. I mean, I hate to be that harsh on some of them, not all, but some of them. And you're dangerous because you're misleading people because you only know enough to be dangerous at a cocktail party. That's about it. You don't have any depth of knowledge about these conditions. But we're quick to pathologize and label people. We're quick to pathologize and label kids with diagnoses. You've heard me say this many, many times before. Just because a kid is kind of very quiet, introspective, kind of observant and maybe a little socially awkward doesn't mean that they're autistic. Well, we're so quick to jump right in and label it because it gives us a sense of control. Whereas you could just say, maybe they're a 5.
Yeah.
Now, if they are legitimately on the autism spectrum, then okay, that's fine. But that really requires discernment and time and thought instead of just leaping to quick conclusions about things, Same thing with, like, sometimes people say, oh, he's so distractible. He's so this, he's so that. And he's got ADHD. And I'm like, actually, maybe that's a 7 or a 9.
Right.
And then we pathologize the personality.
Yeah.
It just needs to be stewarded. It doesn't need to be medicated. Now, there are times when it does, and that's where the discernment comes in. But if you don't have clinical training in pharmacology, in proper diagnostic protocols, then you're actually just misleading people on the internet. That's all you're doing. And that's not healthy.
And when I think about therapists, because we're talking to therapists today, who worry about clients over-identifying with type when they come in and say, hey, this is what I am. I feel like when that's happened, they've missed the point. The Enneagram isn't doing the work, it's supporting the work. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. So in my coaching, because I don't do therapy anymore, but I do a lot of coaching, one-on-one coaching, right? And by the way, people can always investigate that possibility. They can go to Wendy at ianmorgangrand.com and get some information on how to do coaching with me. I use the Enneagram as one tool among many on my belt of skills, right? It is not the center of my work, right? Like my work tends to be at the intersection of psychology, therapy, coaching, spiritual direction, in that zone where it's kind of a conflation of all of those things. And I just use the Enneagram when it's a useful tool, when the client is really excited about it. Because, sometimes I have clients, they're like, I don't want to do that. And I'll be like, no problem. I got lots of other stuff in the bag. It's not like, oh, my whole life has to be revolved around the Enneagram. Now, that said, do I encourage people to do it? Absolutely, especially if they're at the beginning of a self-awareness journey. Like I have a lot of clients who come in and they are uber successful at their jobs, in their work, in many of their endeavors, but so much of their life has been spent focusing on outward achievement, things outside of themselves, raising children, raising a family, killing it in their jobs, going to grad school. You look at decades of just outwardly focused, getting achievement and some of them have high IQs, but really low EQ, like very low emotional intelligence. And so I'm a little bit like, all right, so I just read this book I really like. This is answering the question. Uh-huh. It's called The Lion Tracker's Guide to Life.
Okay. It's interesting because you threw out that term earlier.
Oh, yeah.
When we were just gabbing, you threw out. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just saying, like, I'm a little bit of a tracker with my clients. I'm like, okay, well, let's just follow the inside. Let's follow your internal tracks and see where we're going.
That's cool.
And at the end of it, what we're looking for is a realized self.
So I love that about you and what you just said, because when we talk about the tool of the Enneagram, it should always increase compassion, increase flexibility, right?
Oh, yeah.
Not like make someone feel like they need to be defended or critical of themselves. So if you were to ask one simple question, let me put it this way.
Can I just say one thing, though? Can I just say one thing? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That's all right.
Actually, apparently I'm not, because I'm doing it. Don't you love it when people say that? People are like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Like when someone comes up to you and you're like having a conversation with someone.
You actually interrupted me very well. You did that very well.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Then what did you mean to do? Of course you meant to interrupt me. Yeah. You're doing it.
Right.
No, I sort of feel like when you're doing therapy, no matter regardless of what type of therapy you're doing, whether it's cognitive behavioral work or IFS, it should all lead to compassion. It should all lead to flexibility, not rigidity. We want to move away from kind of rigid thinking. It should help move us. And by the way, we should have a show on this, from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset.
Yeah.
Right. It should do lots of things, right? It should draw you in my world. It should draw you closer to God as you understand God, because I do believe that humans tend to be happier. Actually, the research proves this. Human beings tend to be happier when they have a relationship with some kind of higher reality, right? That guides in their lives, right? You and I would call that God. Or Jesus or the Holy Spirit, but I'm not in the business of pressuring people into my point of view. I have to respect boundaries in therapy. So all to say, we want that to be an outcome. Now, what the Enneagram does do, however, particularly in the beginning, is it reveals to you these patterns of, on one level, thinking, behaving, and feeling that are not very attractive. Some of which are manipulative, and some of which are bad for us and for our relationships. They just don't serve us very well in adulthood, particularly. Now, that being said, that can arouse feelings of guilt, shame, discomfort, distress, and I think some of that is normal and a little healthy, actually. if, and only if, it leads to what you and I would call repentance. And I don't mean that in, oh, God, forgive me, or that kind of thing. That's not what I mean by repentance. Repentance meaning a change of mind. Oh, this doesn't work.
Yeah. Right.
I am going to change as an Enneagram 4, I compare myself to others all the time, and it makes me miserable. And I don't like that about myself. And when I first learned about it, I grimaced and felt a little worse about myself for a moment. But then over time, it led me to repent, meaning, again, to change my mind about how the world works and how I should be in the world. So I do think there is, yes, eventually it gets to compassion. It gets to, an intelligent self-valuing, but it has its dips along the way, right? Like where we have these revelations that are a little kind of queasy feelings come up.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm going to tee us up to go in a certain direction. But before I do, I want to ask you if you have a question a therapist can ask themselves about their client as to whether or not the Enneagram, whether it's working for them at that point or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, back to something I said earlier. Part of it is
it's
the
all
client,
about timing. Timing is really what I was getting to. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I sort of feel like, number one, is the client interested in doing it? Don't thrust it on them. I oftentimes will say something, I've got this system that helps you understand yourself at a depth that's both profound, and it will describe your inner world with uncanny accuracy. And I'm just wondering if that's something you're interested in as part of this journey of you and me working together to kind of get a baseline in a common vernacular. And I don't even try and say it that persuasively. That felt pretty persuasive, or persuasion oriented. I just throw it out there. And now, again, granted, most people that come to see me know that I do Enneagram work. So, but other therapists, I would just say, is the client curious? Do they want to go there with you? And then if they don't use it, because they will feel manipulated.
Or save it and use it later, but definitely use it.
Yeah. Well, sometimes then later on, 6 months into the relationship, they may bring it up.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, we're ready.
This ad is sponsored by BetterHelp.
February can make it feel like everyone else has their love life figured out. Like they're starring in a rom-com and you're over here improvising with a half-written script and cold coffee. But here's the truth. Whether you're married, dating, single, or happily focused on you, most of us are still figuring it out, including me. And therapy can be a really practical way to take some pressure off. Get clear on what you want, notice what feels heavy, and figure out what's getting in the way of healthier connection. BetterHelp makes it easier to start. Their therapists are fully licensed in the U.S. and follow a strict code of conduct. They do the matching work up front with a quick questionnaire, and with over 12 years of experience, they usually get it right the first time. And if it's not a fit, you can switch therapists anytime from their tailored recommendations. With over 30,000 therapists and more than 6 million people served worldwide, it's the largest online therapy platform. And sessions average a 4.9 out of 5 rating from over 1.7 million client reviews. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/typology podcast. That's betterhelp.com/typology podcast.
So I was just thinking about when you first started learning about the Enneagram. Well, you go way back with it, but there was a point where you're doing some research and you used to say, Anthony, you were so 4.
Oh.
I just had to bust you on the air. So let's talk the Enneagram assessment in clinical practice. Like, tell us, you already started going there a little bit. Let's talk about that though.
Okay. So when I first learned the Enneagram, there was a lot of kind of mystical poo-pooing on assessments. Okay. And you can only learn it through being with this type of person who understands the Enneagram. You can only understand your type by reading books or going to day-long workshops. And I used to think to myself sometimes, are these people encouraging people to sign up for their workshops because that's the way they want them to figure out their type? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's kind of cynical. I think some people honestly believe that that's the only way you can do it. Now, the problem for me as a therapist who had studied psychometrics in graduate school is that I knew how helpful a good personality assessment could be, whether that is the big five, right? The big five factor, or, the plethora of other ones that are available. And I was like, the problem isn't that an assessment isn't helpful. The problem is there's just not that many good assessments. Because, dude, you've heard me bitch about this. If I come across one more Enneagram assessment that some Cucamonga head put together in their basement after reading one book on the Enneagram, and they just took stereotype things and threw them into questions, and then what are they looking for? They want your email. That's what they want. They don't want to tell you your type. They don't even understand how to construct a psychometric. Right. I took courses in statistics. I took courses in all the different types of psychometrics at the time, but I don't know how to construct one. It's super difficult. So, we spent $200,000 or $300,000, somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000 with a research psychologist putting together our assessment because I was determined to come up with one that I knew was reliable and valid, that would have the best shot at accurately helping a person determine their type, so that a therapist could use it and feel like I am not, giving my client a quiz that tells them they're a golden retriever.
Right.
You know what I mean? Oh, I'm a penguin, I'm a butterfly. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to pull my hair out, because it diminishes the value of the Enneagram when people do that. It misleads people. It tells people that there's something they're not. And to me, that is not I just think it's an unethical email grab, right? That's all it is.
Yeah. And you get what you pay for, right? And I can attest to the fact that and this isn't like a big assessment commercial, but you did spend a lot of money to get it right, and cost to take it. And I think if you're taking a free Enneagram test online, it kind of tells you what that's about, and usually probably an email grab. So
yeah, and just to be clear, and we may dive into this in a minute, but I tell people all the time, look, because some people will say to me, oh, well, it's a self-report assessment, so therefore it's not accurate. And I'm like, that's ridiculous, because you go to the doctor, you go see your MD, and the questions they ask are all self-report questions.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Do you have a headache? Yes. How often do you have it? And you're giving self-report answers to those questions, right? Now, your doctor doesn't assume that all of your self-report is completely accurate, but they're getting a general picture of what's going on with you. Same thing with this, right? You take a test and you don't say to yourself, finally, this test, without a doubt, is going to nail my type.
Right.
Very often it will. And at the same time, you should think to yourself, okay, this is one data point. In addition to this, I should meet with somebody who really knows the Enneagram to validate and just to reaffirm that the test is right or wrong. Secondly, I should continue to read books that validate or, maybe offer pushback against how I typed on the assessment. It's just a data point, but it's a starting point.
Yeah, and there's no tool that hands you your identity, but this does hand you a mirror, which is what we're after, right? So,
yes, yeah. And I tell people all the time, like I meet with people who've taken an assessment, mine or someone else's, and maybe it pegged them as a social 4 instead of a self-pres 4. We talk for 15 minutes, we straighten it out. That's the value of having a therapist or a coach, right? Like that can say, oh, I don't, like we do on the show, right?
Well,
like
takes me to my next point. I wanted to ask, like, if the therapist is working with an assessment, what does it look like to hold that assessment in a way that supports the work? That makes
Just
sense?
like I said.
Yeah.
Just like I said. And one thing, and this is old hack, this is old school advice, right? I never tell people their type. I really don't. Sometimes I'll be like, I just wonder, based on what you're saying, if it wouldn't be helpful for you to read up on sevens. I know you think, that you're an 8, but I really want you to take a look at 7 and tell me what you think. And then I just provoke curiosity for them. Sometimes I'm right. Sometimes I'm wrong. And sometimes, but the worst thing that can happen is they learn more about that type en route to saying, no, I still think I'm an 8. It's so much of this is about diving into the pool of this big pool of meaning that the Enneagram provides. And we swim around and we learn about all these different types. We learn about all these different ways of being in the world. And as you're doing it, you're coming closer to a knowledge of your own type. But man, you're getting a lot of other stuff in there too. That's incredibly valuable.
So when we talk about trauma and the nervous system, and I know our therapists are leaning in now, but how do you help clinicians think about type as adaptive strategy, especially when trauma is a part of their story?
Yeah. Well, I want to be mindful of the fact that I never advertise myself as a trauma. Like I don't do EMDR, right? Like I don't do brain spotting. I don't do a lot of that work. I can help clients at a very basic level deal with dysregulation and teach them how to regulate themselves through some very basic things. Just not an area of interest for me. Now, I do trauma-informed work, and I do understand trauma, both personally and professionally. But I just don't, because I'm not doing general clinical therapy with people, it's more coaching. I don't dive into those realms. That I would outsource to someone who does that every day. That said, I've often mentioned on the program that you could understand your type. I've heard one teacher do this as a response to very early childhood trauma. Like your type is itself a trauma response, right? And it's like I experienced the trauma of parents who communicated to me that their love was conditional on my being successful or winning or always looking good or making them look good through my achievement, right? That's a kind of trauma, right? It's a little T trauma. It's complex, but it's what it is. And therefore, I developed this 3 strategy as a response to that trauma. Or a 4 that says, I came up with this way of being in the world in part because of an experience of real or perceived abandonment. Or, and I could go through all the types and do this, right? So I think that's an interesting way of thinking about type, that type is somehow or another, there's a hard or at least a dotted line between early childhood trauma and the adaptive stratagem of our type that we adopted early on to make our way in the world, right?
So what does it look like when the Enneagram is actually working well with the client in a session?
Well, usually when your Enneagram work is going well in a session, it shows up in other places. People are more, their capacity for self-observation increases and strengthens. They become more emotionally attuned to themselves and to other people. They become more discerning about their habitual thinking, right? For example, an Enneagram 1 wrestling with this inner critic might be able to stand apart from the inner critic, recognize that that the inner critic actually loves them a lot. The inner critic has good intentions for them. Now I'm bleeding into some internal family system stuff here, but it really wants the best for them, and they think this is helping. The inner critic thinks this is going to help. But because it's usually a very young part of us, it doesn't realize that it's also really hurting us, right? It's like the inner critic. If you ever, so interesting, Anthony, how often I have sat with a coaching client and I've said, okay, let's just talk to your inner critic for a second. And I'll say to them, close your eyes and find it in your body. They locate it in their body. And I'm like, okay, ask it if it would be willing to have a conversation with you. They have a conversation. We actually did this on a show once with somebody. And I said, I'll say to them, ask your inner critic how old it is. And invariably, it's 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old. It's a little kid inside that's issuing this barrage of criticism because it thinks it has the mind, if you will, of a 7-year-old. And so it doesn't know it's hurting you. It's just repeating this pattern, right? So you begin to see when Enneagram work is being done, this observer comes up, this kind of self-understanding comes up. After a bit of time, they get past the initial sting of their type, which often happens. They kind of get to this place of, oh, I get it. My Enneagram type, isn't who I am. It's more of a response to what happened to me too. And so this self-compassion comes up, this kind of kindness comes up, and also a kind of kindness and compassion for other people who carry a different burden, Now, I've actually never seen, or I can't think of a therapist that used the Enneagram exclusively as the tool of choice. So, it's usually, most therapists I know are eclectic, right? They're drawing on a lot of different modalities, sometimes in the same session, right? And, some are more like, how do I say this? Fluent in attachment theory, or they've been trained in internal lifting. They may have a favorite modality, but they're using it in combinations. And usually that's what I hear from therapists is that I use it in combination with lots of other tools. And I know when it's being used successfully it's opening my clients' eyes to these patterns that are not serving them very well and that obscure who they truly are. That's like, I know I said that earlier in the show, but I can't overstate it. Like, you're not your type. You are not your type. Your type is a kind of defensive, it's almost like a fortress or a barricade around your true self, around this authentic person that you are. And it's tricky. It takes time and energy and prayer and love to dismantle those parts of it that are really unhelpful.
Yeah, that's good. Something you said a minute ago, one of the things I like to say is one of the things Enneagram does at its best is it turns self-attack into like self-awareness and self-compassion.
Yeah. Or how about just bewilderment and confusion into clarity?
Yeah.
Because you've spent your whole life doing stuff going, why do I keep doing this?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, you're stuck in the autopilot of your personality. That's why.
Yeah.
And you've been doing it for so long, you don't know that there's maybe another way.
Yeah.
And you're still not convinced that it isn't working, right? Like, but something isn't. Otherwise, what are you doing in therapy, right? Yeah. So, yeah. And that's why, and again, I'm going to make a pitch for it and shamelessly so, because I believe in it, that why I created the Typology Enneagram assessment, right? It's about opening it. It helps people find their type, to open a conversation about it, and it builds emotional intelligence, clinical wisdom, care, clarity, right? So folks can go over to my website, ianmorgancron.com. And right now you can download the free therapist discussion and reflection guide, right? It's a very practical, therapist-friendly resource to help folks integrate the assessment into their work in a way that supports insight, healing, and transformation. So it's no hype. It's just a solid tool in service of the good work you're already doing. Because when the Enneagram is used well, it doesn't replace therapy. It just really deepens it. Hey, everybody. May you have love. May you have joy. May you have peace. May you have healing. May you have rest. Until next time.